There's a man who spent his whole life looking for greatness, and what he found surprised him more than anything he expected, because the people he ended up admiring most were not the ones history calls flawless. They were the ones who were willing to be unfinished out loud, who let the world watch them struggle toward an idea instead of pretending they already had all the answers. And somewhere in that search, he discovered a question that quietly changes how a person sees their own life, which is simply this: whose greatness are you measuring yourself against? And is that the right ruler at all? That question sat at the center of a book written by a man named Ralph Waldo Emerson, a thinker from Concord, Massachusetts, who in the middle of the 1800s set out to write about 6 extraordinary individuals who shaped the way humanity understands itself. He called the book Representative Men, and the title alone tells you something about how he saw the world. He did not believe these 6 people were perfect. He did not believe they were superhuman or untouchable. He believed they represented something universal that lives quietly inside every one of us, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be given permission to grow. Emerson was not interested in biography for its own sake. He was not trying to recite dates and achievements the way a textbook might. He wanted to understand why certain individuals seem to embody an entire way of being human, why one person becomes a symbol for skepticism, another for mysticism, another for practical genius, another for poetic vision, another for shrewd worldly cleverness, and another for literary universality. He wanted to know what made these traits rise to the surface in these particular men. And more importantly, he wanted his readers to ask themselves which of these qualities live inside them too, often buried, often unused, often waiting for the right moment to be called upon. This is where the real heartbeat of the book lives, not in the names themselves, but in the invitation Emerson extends to every person listening. He is not asking you to worship these 6 figures. He is asking you to recognize yourself in fragments of them, to see that genius is not some faraway mountain peak reserved for a chosen few, but something closer to a seed that exists in ordinary human nature, needing only the right conditions to grow tall. These 6 remarkable figures. It helps to understand why Emerson chose this approach in the first place, because there is something deeply comforting hidden in his reasoning. He believed history does not move because of abstract forces alone. It moves because individuals dare to think clearly, feel deeply, and act according to their own inner truth, even when the world pressures them to conform. He believed that when we study someone who lived with extraordinary clarity in one area of human experience, we are not just learning about that person, we are learning about a dimension of ourselves we might not have explored yet. Imagine for a moment a young person sitting alone at night, uncertain about their place in the world, wondering if they have anything special to offer. Emerson would gently suggest that this person is not empty. They are simply standing in front of a door they have not yet opened, and behind that door is a version of themselves shaped by curiosity, by skepticism, by wonder, by practicality, by creativity, or by quiet wisdom. The 6 men in this book each walk confidently through one of those doors. Emerson wants you to realize you have the same doors waiting for you. So let us walk through them together, slowly, the way you might walk through an old sunlit library, pulling one book off the shelf after another, discovering not just stories about famous men, but mirrors reflecting different parts of your own potential. The first figure Emerson introduces is Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher whose name still echoes through nearly every serious conversation about truth, justice, and the nature of reality. Plato represents what Emerson calls the philosopher, the mind that constantly seeks unity behind the chaos of everyday experience. Plato lived in a world where humans were captivated by appearances, by surface-level events, by emotional reactions to immediate circumstances. But Plato kept asking a deeper question underneath all of that noise. He wanted to know what remains true, no matter what changes around us. He wanted to find the unchanging idea behind the changing object. Picture a child holding a seashell, fascinated by its spiral shape. Most people simply enjoy the shell and move on. But a mind like Plato's wonders why spirals appear again and again throughout nature, in shells, in galaxies, in the way water swirls down a drain. He is not satisfied with admiring the surface. He wants to understand the deeper pattern connecting all these surfaces together. That hunger to discover unity within diversity is what Emerson celebrates in Plato, and it represents something powerful inside every person who has ever asked, why does this matter, or what connects all of this together? Emerson admires Plato not because he had all the answers, but because he refused to settle for shallow ones. Plato gave humanity the courage to ask large questions about existence, about the soul, about justice, about love, and he gave structure to that questioning so that future generations could build upon it instead of starting from zero every single time. Emerson saw this hunger to seek deeper meaning as something universal, something every human carries, even if modern life often distracts us from it. Think about the moments in your own life when you pause during something ordinary, maybe a walk outside, maybe a quiet evening, and suddenly felt a flash of wonder about why things exist the way they do. That flash, however brief, is the Platonic spirit awakening inside you. You do not need to become a professional philosopher to honor that spirit. You simply need to give yourself permission to without immediately demanding a practical answer. But Emerson does not let Plato stand alone as the perfect symbol of clear thinking. He balances him almost immediately with a strikingly different figure, a man who represents doubt rather than certainty, questioning rather than answering, and this is where the story becomes even more compelling. Because Emerson introduces Swedenborg and Montaigne as two contrasting forces that pull at the human mind from opposite directions. Montaigne represents skepticism, not the bitter or cynical kind, but the healthy, humble kind that refuses to accept ideas blindly just because they sound impressive. Montaigne is the voice inside you that says, "Wait, let me think about this for myself before I believe it." Emerson respected this because he understood that without healthy skepticism, people become vulnerable to manipulation, to empty authority, to ideas that sound wise but collapse under pressure. Montaigne reminds humanity that questioning is not weakness, it is intellectual self-respect. There is a quiet kind of bravery in admitting you do not know everything. Many people feel pressured to appear confident at all times, to have an opinion ready for every situation, to nod along even when something does not feel quite right inside them. Montaigne offers relief from that pressure. He tells us it is acceptable, even noble, to say, "I am not certain, let me examine this more closely." Emerson saw this as a form of intellectual freedom, a refusal to be intimidated by grand claims simply because they are stated with confidence. If Montaigne represents healthy doubt, then Swedenborg represents something almost opposite, an intense mystical certainty about the spiritual structure of the universe. Swedenborg believed he had access to deep spiritual truths about the nature of existence, about angels, about symbolism hidden inside everything in creation. Emerson fascinating, not because he agreed with every claim Swedenborg made, but because Swedenborg represented the part of the human mind that longs for spiritual meaning behind physical reality. Many people have experienced a quiet moment, when something ordinary suddenly felt sacred. Maybe a sunrise, maybe the birth of a child, maybe an unexplainable feeling of connection to something larger than themselves. Swedenborg lived inside that feeling almost permanently. He saw symbolism everywhere, believing the physical world constantly mirrors a deeper spiritual order. Emerson uses Swedenborg to remind us that human beings are not only thinking creatures, we are also spiritual creatures, hungry for meaning that goes beyond logic alone. By placing skepticism side by side, Emerson is showing us something essential about the human experience, the constant tension between questioning everything and longing to believe in something greater. Most people swing between these two forces throughout their lives. Some days you crave certainty, comfort, and spiritual meaning. Other days you crave clear-eyed honesty and refuse to be fooled by comforting illusions. Emerson is not telling you to pick a side permanently. He is showing you that both forces lie at healthy human thinking, and wisdom often comes from knowing when to lean into each one. If you are enjoying this audiobook, please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library. It helps the channel grow and allows more timeless books to reach more people. And right now, we are only getting started, because the next figure Emerson introduces brings us into one of the most electrifying minds in human history, a man whose name still sparks fear and admiration nearly 2 centuries later. That man is Napoleon Bonaparte, and Emerson uses him to explore a very different kind of greatness, not philosophical, not mystical, but intensely practical, ambitious, and driven by sheer force of will. Napoleon represents what Emerson calls the man of the world, someone who understands how to read situations quickly, act decisively, and bend circumstances toward his vision through relentless energy and command. Emerson does not romanticize Napoleon blindly. He acknowledges the danger in unchecked ambition, the way power can corrupt even brilliant minds, the way conquest built on ego eventually crumbles under its own weight. But he also recognizes something undeniably impressive in Napoleon's ability to organize chaos, to make rapid decisions under pressure, and to inspire intense loyalty through sheer competence and confidence. Picture a massive battlefield filled with confusion, smoke, noise, and fear. Most people in that environment would freeze, overwhelmed by uncertainty. Napoleon thrived in exactly that kind of chaos. He saw patterns where others saw panic. He made decisions in seconds that other commanders would have debated for hours. Emerson uses this to illustrate a particular kind of genius, the genius of decisive action, grounded in deep practical understanding of human behavior and worldly mechanics. There is something inside every person that resonates with this kind of energy, even if you have never commanded an army or built an empire. Think about moments in your own life when circumstances became overwhelming, deadlines piling up, responsibilities multiplying, everything demanding attention at once. In those moments, some part of you had to summon decisiveness, had to act instead of waiting for perfect clarity. That instinct to take charge amid uncertainty is the same spark Emerson identifies in Napoleon, just on a much smaller, much more human scale. But Emerson is careful to show the limitations of this kind of greatness too. Napoleon's downfall came largely from believing his own will could overpower every obstacle indefinitely. He underestimated the cost of endless ambition without restraint. Emerson uses this as a quiet warning, suggesting that raw determination, while powerful, becomes dangerous when it forgets humility, when it forgets that the world does not exist simply to be conquered, but also to be understood, respected, and lived alongside other human beings with their own dreams and dignity. This contrast becomes even more meaningful when Emerson moves to the next figure in his collection, someone who represents almost the complete opposite of Napoleon's worldly ambition. A writer whose entire purpose was to dissolve the boundaries between the self and the universe, encouraging readers to see existence, not as something to conquer, but as something to merge with in quiet reverence. That figure is Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the German writer often remembered for his extraordinary range of genius across poetry, science, philosophy, and storytelling. Emerson presents Goethe as the writer, the figure who represents the human ability to absorb the entire world into language, to take every experience, every observation, every emotion, and transform it into something universal that other people can recognize within themselves. Goethe believed that nothing in life was wasted material. Every relationship, every disappointment, every scientific curiosity, every walk through nature could become fuel for deeper understanding and creative expression. Emerson admired this because it represents a profoundly hopeful way of living. The idea that your experiences, even painful ones, are not meaningless interruptions in your life, but raw material waiting to be shaped into wisdom, art, or insight. Think of someone you know who seems to notice everything, who remembers small details from years ago, who finds meaning in ordinary conversations that most people forget within minutes. That heightened attentiveness to life is the spirit Emerson celebrates in Goethe. It is the belief that paying close attention to existence, rather than rushing past it, reveals patterns and beauty that would otherwise remain invisible. Goethe's genius reminds us that creativity is not only for professional artists. It is a way of engaging with life itself, transforming raw experience into meaning through reflection and expression. Even if you never write a novel or compose a poem, this Goethean spirit shows up whenever you pause to truly notice your life, instead of letting it blur past unnoticed. Yet Emerson does not portray Goethe as flawless either. There is a certain emotional distance in Goethe's approach to life, a tendency to observe more than to deeply commit emotionally. Emerson gently suggests that pure intellectual absorption of experience, without warmth or moral direction, can become cold, detached, almost mechanical. Genius without heart, he implies, risks becoming hollow no matter how impressive it appears on the surface. This leads beautifully into the final figure Emerson explores with the deepest personal admiration, a literary giant whose work feels less like fiction and more like an entire universe of human nature compressed into language. This figure is William Shakespeare, and Emerson treats him with a kind of reverence reserved for someone who seems to have understood every possible version of being human. Shakespeare represents what Emerson calls the poet, but not in a narrow sense limited to writing verses. Emerson means something larger, the ability to give voice to the full spectrum of human emotion and experience so completely that readers across centuries and cultures still see themselves reflected in those words. Shakespeare did not simply create characters, he created entire emotional worlds: jealousy, ambition, love, grief, humor, madness, wisdom, betrayal, all rendered with such precision that readers feel personally understood by someone who lived centuries before they were even born. Emerson marvels at how Shakespeare seemed to disappear into his characters completely, giving voice to villains and heroes alike with equal depth and understanding. There is something almost spiritual in this ability, the willingness to step outside personal identity and inhabit the experience of someone completely different from yourself. Emerson sees this as one of the highest expressions of human empathy, the capacity to imagine yourself fully into another person's inner world. Picture watching a play where a villain delivers a monologue so convincing that, for a brief moment, you almost understand his twisted logic, almost feel the emotional wound driving his cruelty. That uncomfortable but illuminating experience is exactly what Shakespeare mastered. He did not simply judge human flaws from a distance. He climbed inside them and showed audiences the tangled reasoning behind even the darkest choices. Emerson believed this kind of deep empathy, even toward flawed or dangerous characters, expands the moral imagination of everyone who experiences it. By the time Emerson finishes exploring these 6 extraordinary minds, philosopher, mystic, skeptic, conqueror, writer, and poet, he is not asking readers to rank them or choose a favorite. He is revealing something far more personal and far more useful. The understanding that greatness is not one fixed shape. It takes many forms, and each form lives, in smaller proportions, inside ordinary people living ordinary lives. You do not need to conquer continents like Napoleon to understand decisive courage. You do not need to write tragedies like Shakespeare to understand deep empathy. You do not need mystical visions like Swedenborg to feel a yearning for spiritual meaning. You do not need philosophical training like Plato to wonder about the deeper unity behind existence. These qualities already exist inside you in smaller, quieter versions, waiting for moments in your life when they are called upon. Maybe you showed Napoleon's decisiveness the day you had to make an impossible choice under pressure, with no time to overthink it. Maybe you showed Shakespeare's empathy the day you sat quietly with a grieving friend, imagining their pain as if it were your own. Maybe you showed Montaigne's healthy skepticism the day you refused to accept something just because everyone else believed it. Maybe you showed Goethe's attentiveness the day you noticed something beautiful in an ordinary moment that most people would have missed entirely. Emerson's deeper message, the quiet thread running underneath every page of this book, is that representative men are not separate from humanity. They are humanity, expressed at full volume in particular directions. Their greatness is not foreign to your nature. It is simply your nature, amplified through focus, circumstance, and devotion to a particular calling. This idea carries enormous comfort, especially for anyone who has ever felt small compared to historical giants. Emerson is gently telling you that the same raw material exists inside you. What separates ordinary life from extraordinary impact is rarely some impossible gap of inherited genius. It is often the willingness to give full attention, full devotion, and full courage to qualities that already exist within you in smaller form. There is something deeply human about wanting to matter, about wondering if your life carries any real significance beyond daily routines and quiet responsibilities. Representative Men speaks directly into that wondering, not with empty flattery, but with thoughtful reassurance grounded in serious philosophical reflection. Emerson is not telling you that you are automatically as accomplished as Shakespeare or Napoleon. He is telling you that the same human spirit fueling their achievements pulses quietly inside your own life, waiting for direction, attention, and courage to be expressed. Consider how this changes the way you might look at your own daily existence. The next time you face a difficult decision and feel the pull to act decisively despite uncertainty, you are not behaving randomly. You are touching the same inner resource that fueled historical figures known for courage under pressure. The next time you sit with a friend in pain and try to understand their suffering deeply, you are not simply being polite. You are exercising the same empathetic imagination that built timeless literature. The next time you question a popular belief instead of accepting it blindly, you are not being difficult. You are honoring the same skeptical integrity that protected entire societies from blind conformity throughout history. Emerson wrote during a time of massive change when industrial growth, scientific discovery, and shifting social structures were reshaping how people understood their place in the world. Many felt overwhelmed by rapid transformation, uncertain about meaning in an increasingly mechanical and competitive society. Representative Men offered something steadying during that uncertainty, a reminder that human greatness is not dependent on external conditions alone. It is rooted in inner qualities that remain accessible, no matter how the outer world shifts and changes. That message feels remarkably relevant even now, in a world filled with constant noise, comparison, and pressure to measure your worth against impossible standards displayed endlessly through screens and headlines. Emerson's gentle reminder cuts through that noise, suggesting that true significance is not measured by visibility or fame, but by the depth and sincerity with which you engage with whatever calling resonates inside you. Whether that calling involves deep thought, spiritual reflection, healthy skepticism, decisive action, creative expression, or empathetic understanding. There is also something quietly liberating in recognizing that even history's greatest figures carried serious flaws. Napoleon's ambition eventually consumed him. Goethe's intellectual detachment sometimes lacked warmth. Swedenborg's mysticism sometimes drifted into rigid certainty. Montaigne's skepticism, if taken too far, risked becoming permanent indecision rather than thoughtful reflection. Even Plato's pursuit of pure ideal forms occasionally distanced him from messy lived human reality. Emerson does not hide these imperfections, because he wants readers to understand that greatness is never about flawless perfection. It is about intense devotion to one particular dimension of human experience, even while other dimensions remain underdeveloped. This means you do not need to wait until you feel completely whole or completely confident before honoring your own unique strengths. Every historical figure Emerson examines carried unfinished edges, unresolved contradictions, and personal limitations. Yet their devotion to their particular gift still left a lasting mark on human history and imagination. Their imperfection did not disqualify their greatness. It simply proved that greatness and imperfection are able to exist together inside the same human life. Think about how freeing this idea becomes when applied to your own personal goals and dreams. Perhaps you hesitate to pursue something meaningful because you feel you're not disciplined enough, not talented enough, not confident enough yet. Emerson's representative men suggest that such hesitation, while understandable, may be unnecessary. Even the figures history remembers as towering examples of human achievement carried doubts, contradictions, and unfinished qualities throughout their lives. Their greatness did not require the absence of flaws. It required focused devotion despite those flaws. As the book moves toward its closing reflections, Emerson widens the lens even further, suggesting that the real purpose of studying great individuals is not hero worship, but self-discovery. He warns against the temptation to elevate any single person into an untouchable idol, because doing so quietly diminishes your own sense of personal potential. If you place someone so far above yourself that you stop seeing any connection between their journey and your own, you lose the very benefit their example was meant to offer. This is one of the most important emotional turns in the entire book. Emerson is not asking you to admire these 6 men from a distance, frozen behind glass like museum exhibits. He is asking you to draw inspiration from them the way you might draw warmth from a fire, close enough to feel the heat personally, close enough to imagine your own hands capable of building something meaningful too. Think about how often admiration, when taken too far, becomes a quiet form of self-erasure. People sometimes idolize public figures so intensely that they forget their own potential entirely, convincing themselves that greatness belongs only to a special category of humans far removed from their own ordinary existence. Emerson firmly resists this mindset. He believed admiration should awaken inspiration, not create permanent distance between you and the qualities you admire. This is why Emerson frequently reminds readers throughout the book that even legendary figures were shaped by ordinary human experiences, mistakes, doubts, and gradual development over time. Some not born instantly capable of writing timeless tragedies. Napoleon was not born already commanding armies with effortless precision. Goethe was not born instinctively understanding the deep interconnectedness of art and nature. These qualities developed slowly, shaped by curiosity, effort, failure, and continued engagement with their particular passions over many years. This detail matters enormously for anyone listening who feels discouraged about their own pace of growth. Greatness, in Emerson's vision, is rarely instant. It is cultivated gradually, often through quiet persistence rather than dramatic breakthroughs. The qualities admired in these 6 men did not appear overnight. They were nurtured patiently, much the way a gardener tends to a plant long before it ever blooms into something beautiful. There is something profoundly reassuring in this slow, patient vision of greatness. It removes the pressure of needing immediate proof that your efforts matter. It suggests that quiet, consistent engagement with whatever calling resonates inside you, whether intellectual curiosity, creative expression, decisive courage, or compassionate understanding, gradually shapes a meaningful life, even without instant recognition or applause. Emerson also gently challenges the assumption that greatness must always look dramatic or extraordinary from the outside. Some of the qualities he celebrates, like Montaigne's quiet skepticism or Goethe's attentive observation, are subtle, internal, easily overlooked by anyone glancing at a person's life from the outside. This suggests that meaningful greatness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it exists quietly within someone's habits of thought, their willingness to question carefully, their attentiveness to small details others overlook, their patient empathy toward people experiencing pain. This subtle form of greatness deserves just as much respect as the loud, dramatic kind associated with conquest or fame. A person who consistently questions popular opinion with thoughtful care, refusing to be swept along by mass emotion, may never receive public recognition, yet they quietly protect the integrity of truth within their own circle of influence. A person who patiently listens to a struggling friend, offering genuine empathy without judgment, may never become famous for compassion, yet they quietly embody one of humanity's most valuable qualities. As Emerson closes his reflections, he leaves readers with an enduring sense of possibility rather than a rigid formula for achievement. He does not provide a checklist guaranteeing greatness. Instead, he offers something more honest and more valuable, a reminder that human potential is wide, varied, and deeply personal. Some people are called toward philosophical reflection, others toward creative expression, others toward spiritual contemplation, others toward compassionate understanding, and others toward honest skepticism. None of these callings is superior to the others. Each represents a different facet of the same underlying human capacity for meaningful engagement with life. This is perhaps the most comforting realization the book offers. You do not need to become a universal genius mastering every quality simultaneously. You simply need to recognize which qualities feel most alive inside you, and then devote yourself patiently to nurturing them. The same way these 6 historical figures devoted themselves to their particular gifts, despite their imperfections, despite their doubts, despite the slow and uncertain pace of early development. Perhaps you are someone who feels most alive when questioning assumptions, gently echoing Montaigne's healthy skepticism. Perhaps you feel most alive when sensing deeper spiritual meaning behind ordinary experiences, echoing Swedenborg's mystical sensitivity. Perhaps you feel most alive making quick, confident decisions under pressure, echoing Napoleon's worldly decisiveness. Perhaps you feel most alive noticing small details and turning experience into reflection, echoing Goethe's attentive creativity. Perhaps you feel most alive imagining yourself inside another person's emotional experience, echoing Shakespeare's deep empathy. Or perhaps you feel most alive searching for unity and meaning behind life's complexity, echoing Plato's philosophical wonder. Whichever resonates most deeply with your own personality, Emerson would encourage you to trust that inclination, rather than dismissing it as insignificant. He would remind you that history's most memorable figures did not become extraordinary by trying to embody every possible quality equally. They became extraordinary by devoting themselves fully to the particular quality that felt most natural and most alive within their own unique character. As this audiobook gently comes to its close, it feels important to sit for a moment with the deeper emotional truth Emerson leaves behind, not as a final lecture, but as a quiet companion thought to carry forward into your own life. Representative Men is not really a book about 6 famous historical figures from centuries past. It is a mirror, carefully polished, inviting you to look closely and recognize fragments of philosopher, mystic, skeptic, conqueror, writer, and poet, quietly woven into your own personality, waiting patiently for moments when you choose to express them fully. Greatness, according to Emerson, is not a distant mountain reserved only for the chosen few who appear in history books. It is closer than that, woven gently into ordinary human nature, waiting for attention, devotion, and quiet courage to bring it forward. The same wonder that drove Plato, the same skepticism that strengthened Montaigne, the same spiritual longing that filled Swedenborg, the same decisive courage that defined Napoleon, the same attentive creativity that shaped Goethe, and the same deep empathy that brought Shakespeare's characters to life. All of it lives quietly inside ordinary people living ordinary days, waiting for the right moment, the right calling, and the right courage to rise gently to the surface. If this story stayed with you, explore the audiobook library and discover more books waiting for you, each one carrying its own quiet wisdom, its own gentle invitation to see your own life a little more clearly, a little more hopefully, and a little more deeply than before. May you carry forward not just the memory of 6 remarkable historical figures, but a renewed sense of trust in the quiet greatness already living patiently inside your own heart, waiting calmly for its moment to grow.